Okay. Let's see. Let me know. Let me turn down that brightness a little bit there. Okay. Let me know when you guys can hear me. As usual, you have the late people complaining. I gave people a few minutes to join. All right. And then let me make sure this is all working. Okay. Discord's up. Great. Sounds good. As usual. That's just like reflecting off of my hair for some reason. But it is what it is. Okay. All righty. So hopefully it's working well. I saw there were like 300 people waiting now. Okay, it's climbing back up again. All right. All right. All right. Okay, so yeah, welcome to the August loose ends. You know, this always happens either the last week of a month, but usually the first week of the following month, you know, whenever there's kind of a gap. And it seemed like today would be a good day to do it, right? There's kind of a lull in news. I mean, you see a lot of, there's a lull in news when you see the usual suspects like WCCF and video cards kind of doing stories they've already ran a few times. No offense, but it's like, when you see the same thing that we've already confirmed a million times, like the same Alder Lake pricing stuff that we've seen leaked before, the same this and this and this, it's like, yeah, it's a slower day. So, and it's before a long weekend, so yeah, it'd be a good time to put out a longer piece of content as well. But I'll talk about the Alder Lake prices. I can see the live chat. For those who've missed the last couple loose ends, the way this works is if you want to ask a question, ask it. And I'm more likely to see it if it's a tipped question. Otherwise, I'm just going to run through the list of Patreon questions I got ahead of time. Remember, if you support Moore's Law is Dead on Patreon, you can ask questions in the Discord while I'm talking. Or if you're at the proper tier, you just can submit a bunch of questions before this starts and get your questions asked for free. So otherwise, I will jump into tipped questions that pop up here as they come up. But I will then, let's get to it. So the first thing I'm going to do is kind of, I like to start by summarizing kind of like what this month was about. And let's just be honest, this month was about Intel leaks. I mean, for once, I shouldn't say for once, I should say more so than I think any month in the past year, Intel's rumors are just all over the place. And it's not because it's not just rumors. Intel is now at Hot Chips in public talking about their products openly and giving us real details about Alder Lake. It's so funny. Again, I keep saying this if you follow the channel, but Alder Lake for me was the first I feel big, decent, far ahead, well researched, well put together leak I've done to my memory. Maybe there was one before it, I don't know, but I think the Whispers of Golden Cove video I did in 2019 was my first good leak, and it's just so funny to finally see Intel talking about it publicly, finally acknowledging the architectures, finally acknowledging the IPC increase. Like it's almost weird, and almost the same goes for Z. I've been pretty excited about Z, or I suppose you're supposed to say XE, but don't bet on it. I'm probably going to keep saying Z for a while until I, at least I don't say Nvidia anymore. And so, yeah, I mean, but I think it's justified that this is a big Intel month because I still don't feel like people have acknowledged just how big of a year from October through all of next year is going to be for Intel proving if they're going to be able to compete with AMD again. I think, AMD's got Zen 4 Genoa, they've got Bergamo, they're going to have Turin. I think for the most part, AMD is going to have overwhelmingly better performance per watt and usually better performance in server for a very long time. By that, I mean like another couple of years. But the way Alder Lake performs, the way, Xe performs, Arc performs, which let me just say this. Can Intel choose a name for their graphics cards? So what is it? It's Intel, Arc, Xe, HPG, Alchemist. Pick a name, Intel. Do you want us to call it Xe? Do you want us to call it Alchemist? Because it sounds like Alchemist is the first architecture, but I thought that was what does Arc mean? What does Xe mean? Why is there Arc and Xe? I don't understand. Which I have a lot more to say about Intel's marketing, but anyways, I'm getting off subject. The way Alder Lake performs is going to set the tone for if I'm betting on them coming back or matching AMD before 2025. I think for sure there will be some crowns traded in the next couple years between AMD and Intel. I think for sure Intel will probably be close to AMD by 2026, but Alder Lake and Xe will tell me if they're going to possibly match AMD sooner or if they will more often than we expect. And I hope they do because we could use more competition. And as much as I said I want AMD to build up a war chest a few years ago and be on top for a long time, I've got to say that I am a bit concerned about pricing if Intel doesn't shake up both the CPU and the GPU market again. But anyways, yeah, so this has been the month of Intel, and I guess the last thing I would say about that is I think everyone should just take a step back right now and think about how crazy next year is going to be. Like, we're ending this year with Alder Lake. Next year is going to be kicked off with Zen 3D, Intel Arc graphics cards, probably some sort of early Lovelace and 6 nanometer RDNA cards or some refreshes, and then Zen 4 and Raptor Lake. And probably by the end of the year, if it's not out, we'll for sure have a very good idea of what Lovelace is, although it'll probably be out. Something will be out, I think, by the end of the year. And the same with RDNA 3. So what we got: Zen 3D, Zen 4, Raptor Lake, Xe, RDNA 3, and Lovelace next year. I mean, my God, next year is going to be crazier than 2019. Next year it's going to be, I'm going to have to start thinking about, and who knows what else Apple is doing and stuff, right? Like I'm going to have to start doing some triage and making some hard decisions about which subjects to cover because it's just going to be so much. But I'm excited and, I can't imagine anyone here isn't. So let me see. I've got some tip questions. So I put a timestamp there. Call it the month of Intel, and 2022 will be crazy. Let me see here. So let me see. We got a few tipped questions. Don't want them to disappear before I answer them. Nathan says 6 nanometer 80 compute unit GPU, 1800 or 2000. So I'm going to interpret your question to mean, are they going to charge $2,000 for a 6 nanometer RDNA 2? And the answer is no, absolutely not. I've heard that AMD is considering charging $2,000 for their top RDNA 3 chip. I've said this in videos. I've said this in podcasts. This isn't the first time I'm saying it. I'm telling you right now, internally, AMD is considering that. But it wouldn't be for like a rebrand of RDNA 2. It would be for something probably twice as good as what we have now. Like that's when they would try to charge that much, is if they're like, hey, look, man, now you can do 8K gaming. Now you can frankly do above 8K 60. So we're going to charge for it if Nvidia can't beat us. And they're going to try to justify it by, 3D stacking being expensive. But the rebrands of RDNA 2, I don't expect them to cost more than the existing cards they're rebranding, if that makes any sense. I assume that's what you meant by your question. Let me see here. Jake Sanders says, thoughts on LA single-threaded numbers. So I assume you mean Alder Lake, not LA. I'm not aware of an LA processor. I mean, my thoughts on Alder Lake, which I guess let's just get into those questions now. I'll put a time because I do have some patron questions about Alder Lake. I mean, I honestly don't even know how to answer that question because it's like I've been saying Golden Cove will have 10 to 20% higher IPC than Tiger Lake, which is Willow Cove, for 2 years. So thoughts on single-threaded numbers? If Alder Lake hits 5.3 gigahertz, and it seems like it does, it's not entirely insane, the single-threaded numbers you're seeing. And what? So I said 2 years ago, 10 to 20% higher IPC than Tiger Lake. Right now, Intel's saying 20% better than Rocket Lake. that lines up. Tiger Lake was a little better than Rocket Lake. So you know, uh, my thoughts are people surprised by Alder Lake leaks coming out right now didn't add up what it would mean if they fixed 10 nanometer and they had a good architecture, right? Do the math. If they can clock it as fast as 14 nanometer or higher and it's 20% higher IPC, yeah, I mean, that means it's got higher clock speeds than Zen 3 at all core boost, at least. And it's also got higher IPC. It's going to be a monster in single threaded. The only thing I would say is I'd be hesitant to make very firm statements about specific wins over Zen in percentage points until we see the full picture, because it's like, oh, let's say all cores boost to 5.2 gigahertz on the top i9. Okay. Is that for 10 seconds before it overheats? Is that, in what apps using AVX 256? Like what, overall, I think it's going to beat Zen 3 in gaming performance and be competitive in multi-threading while using more energy. But it's going to be better in gaming. It's going to have better single-threaded. It's going to have PCIe 5.0, DDR5 support. There's going to be reasons. It's going to be pretty competitive with Zen 3, but it's not going to win in efficiency. Although I think some Alder Lake products actually could be very efficient compared to even Zen 3. But that's what people should expect. And frankly, I kind of feel like that's what people should have always expected. There's probably going to be teething problems. It wouldn't surprise me if it wouldn't. I think it's quite possible that with the little cores turned on in some apps, maybe you get a 5% hit in gaming or something, right? But is that really any difference than early hyperthreading, where if you turn hyperthreading on with Sandy Bridge, you get a 5% performance hit in some games? It's kind of how I see big little. Most time, you're going to want to leave the little cores on. If you turn them off, it's got to be for a real specific game. But, even if a 5% hit happens in some games, it's still got much higher IPC than Zen 3 and clocks faster. So, again, Zen 1 had early problems with that stuff too. Zen 1 got way better as they updated the BIOSes on those motherboards. Outside of early teething problems, little 5% hits here and there, some oddities, I think Alder Lake's going to be very competitive. And so I see a question here about PlayStation in the chat, but let me continue my Alder Lake questions just to wrap that up, because I have two patron questions I want to get to about Alder Lake. So Bfish writes in and he says, I know you've been heavy on Intel lately. With desktop Alder Lake hitting soon, do you see laptop Alder Lake and Rembrandt hitting at CES, or do you think Rembrandt will come later in the year? Honestly, Bfish, off the top of my head, I would just say go watch my Raptor Lake Alder Lake leak from a few months ago. I mean, like that Alder Lake Raptor Lake leak, guys, I outline release dates per SKU, right? I said this 3 months ago, so I don't remember off the top of my head the release date of every single thing. I know the K series on desktop are coming first in October. I know that then comes mobile and so on and so forth. I'm sure in that leak there's an indication, and I believe in that leak I did say something about CES, and I do believe that is when they will show off mobile Alder Lake. But again, go watch that leak, outlines it top to bottom what's going to happen. And as for Rembrandt, I can't say I've been following Rembrandt as closely in the past month, but it's expected in the first half of next year, so it's certainly possible. Although I might expect it a little, because CES is at the beginning of the year, right? CES 2022 dates. It's the very beginning. It's January 7th to 10th. So I would somewhat expect Rembrandt to be shown off. Well, when did they? Let me see this. AMD Renoir unveiled. Was that unveiled at CES? See, it was unveiled. Let's see here. Yeah, but it was a little after. So, oh no. Let's see. Yeah, so they showed that off around then in 20. Yeah, so yeah, I think they might show off Rembrandt then. Nathan Mose writes in. He says, do you think that future lower power variant CPUs will primarily focus more on the efficiency of the little cores in Intel's big little? As in, the big cores will still be highly clocked to the max, and the little cores will be the focus and or be manipulated in clock speeds. Also, will this sort of power efficiency carry over to gaming laptops, making them far more competitive as daily drivers for work? So when it comes, yeah, so again, I just would emphasize this. Think about it, guys. There's Alder Lake that has 8 big cores and 8 little cores. Then there's Raptor Lake that does not increase the big cores, but it doubles little cores. And I at least know of some server stuff and consumer stuff coming that radically ramps up little cores. I know that was that mysterious leak about Arrow Lake. I can't say I have anything to confirm about Arrow Lake at this time. I know Jim said some stuff about it too at Adore TV. But what I will say is look around. It's obvious Intel is massively increasing little cores more so than big cores over the next few years. Do you think they're doing that because they don't bet on the little cores? In fact, I heard a rumor that Jim Keller kind of wanted them to only work on Gracemont, that when he saw that they could get, let's call it not Skylake, maybe you would call it almost not Ice Lake. It's not Ice Lake performance, but let's just say better than Comet Lake performance without hyper-threading LBI, but still better than like Comet Lake IPC out of Gracemont cores. He thought they should just make a ton of those. Like, why even bother with big cores? The big cores are really only like 30% better and take up 4 times the space. I think that's a valid question. But Intel feels that you need those powerful, highly clocked cores. The fact that they're ramping up little cores tells you that that's going to be just as much of a focus, that the little core architectures will matter just as much as the big core architectures. And in the short term, a lot of apps still just use a few cores. So the big cores matter as much right now. But over time, those little cores will probably matter more. And it's not just about efficiency. I really feel like I'm going to have to harp this over and over and over. Big Little is not just about laptop efficiency. Big Little is a method of increasing performance while using less die space. You can get more multi-threading out of a ton of little cores in a given amount of die space than you can just big cores. That's why Intel's doing this. It is not just laptop efficiency, but it will obviously benefit laptops a lot. It's both, right? At the end of the day, anytime you save die space, anytime you save energy, you get performance back, right? Because you can use that die space for other things, or you can clock it higher, so on and so forth. So, and I just feel like I'm gonna have to keep saying that. So I think that answers your question. I think it's gonna benefit everything. I think it will benefit. I will just have to see it. I don't want to place bets because I think people are misinterpreting what Intel's doing with Big Little. It's not exactly the same as what is going on with ARM processors. Like, I don't even want to place bets on if it's for laptop first. They're launching it on desktop first. It's a way of increasing performance on desktop too. They may see it as working better in that realm. Okay. Circle Button Podcast writes in the tip. Thank you for the tip. He says PlayStation Showcase was announced for next Thursday on September 9th. I did just see that. What do you expect to be shown? Any updates on Metal Gear Solid? I feel like I'm getting a Metal Gear Solid question anytime I do a live stream. But let me put this down as a timestamp. I mean, it is interesting, isn't it? Like the second let me look at something here. I want to make sure I get this right. I want to make sure I don't miss this. So I know they announced the Halo Infinite release date. And let me go to news. When was that? When did they technically announce the release date? I know it's on December 8th, but okay, so it seems like a week ago they announced when that's coming out. Now let me do Horizon Forbidden West delayed. When was that officially revealed that it was delayed? Let me see. I'm gonna have to get down. And there's a reason I'm doing this. I'm not wasting your time. Give me a second here. I'm doing this for a reason because I do think the like back and forth between these companies is interesting. See, look at that. What time was this article? Now I need to go down to the hour. 3:30. When did they technically announce it? When did they technically announce? Let's see here. Our number one. Yeah. Yeah, okay. So Halo Infinite got a release date as far as we can tell. Like it was announced the same day Forbidden West was delayed. And then a week after that, Sony announces a PlayStation showcase. All of these things are connected. I feel like a lot of the decision making at Sony has frankly been around when is Halo going to be announced? Because right now everything's selling. I was just talking to the operations director of Funcom, who's working on the new Dune game, made Conan Exiles. He's the next guest for Broken Silicon. Look out for that. That's going to be a really good episode, I think, for you guys. And he was talking about how they can't even get enough consoles and graphics cards to test their games, right? So at the end of the day, what we know is whatever's made is sold, but eventually that might change. And I just feel like Sony feels, I guess I don't know if they're right, but I think Sony feels they don't need to announce anything until they know when Halo's out, because that's when they see Xbox is really competing with them, right? Halo is the haymaker. Halo's the big push from Xbox Series. That's going to be the big exclusive. And so it's very interesting to me that you have Sony delay Horizon and then Halo all of a sudden is getting a release date in December. It's a very last minute release date for Halo, by the way. We're only a few months away. That's pretty close that they announced that release date. So, and then once Halo is announced, Sony's like, okay, when can we do the showcase? So, in terms of what I expect, no updates on Metal Gear Solid except that it exists, and I have nothing to say about the other, stuff that I've leaked before about exclusives. The things I've leaked about Xbox getting, um, Elder Scrolls, any of it. I don't have anything to change here. It's just it's not up to me when it's released or revealed, you know? So, what do I expect? I think now that Halo's finally coming out, um, that Sony will show off some new stuff, right? Because if you think about it, they haven't shown a whole lot. They've basically just shown what you knew they were going to release since when the PS5 came out. So, what do I expect to be shown? There's quite a few games they could show, but they're going to show new stuff, I think. This is no coincidence. Come on, guys. They're doing the showcase right after Halo gets a release date. They're doing this. And they might even be doing it because they didn't want to delay Horizon. I'm guessing they didn't want to. And they're like, "Oh no, we have one less exclusive this fall than we thought we'd have, and they're going to release Halo. We better make sure they know what's coming a month after Halo's out." So that has to be the reason they're scheduling this right now, in my opinion. Meximan and Cheese writes in, thank you for the tip. And he says, I've been in the space for about 6 years, but it seems graphics cards keep getting bigger. Is this aesthetic or is the chunkification necessary? Oh, so you mean like literally physically bigger? Um, I, they go where the market is. I just did a die shrink for patrons where I answered a few questions about where are the low profile graphics cards, what's going on. And I mean, there used to be low profile mid range cards, guys. And if you look at the A2000 from Nvidia, they fit a 3060 die in a low profile 70-watt card. If we wanted to, we could make low profile mid range cards. We could make high end cards that are ITX size. Look at the Fury Nano. It's just the market didn't say it wanted it. People didn't really buy it. And so outside of for like professional use cases where Nvidia needs to have a low profile professional card for their market, that's just not what people have shown they want. And at the end of the day, what you've got to remember is AIBs buy these bomb kits, design these graphics cards from the main design from AMD and Nvidia. And an AIB's job is to make as much money for the best performance they can give you. So if you want to make something that cools as well as a reference RTX 3070, while being this big, practically being an ITX sized card, like I have a Founders Edition 3070 in my system, there's two ways you can do that. You can use more expensive metals and an elaborate cooling design with a micro PCB to allow air to flow through it. Or you can just make a bigger PCB, which makes the tracing, the manufacturing cheaper, that you can just put not a expensive metal cooler, but a bigger cooler that because the heat sinks bigger, cools better, but it takes up twice as much space. So if people tell AIBs they're okay with AIBs making their cards twice as big to save $5 for the same cooling performance, they're going to do that. And at the end of the day as well, I think we're learning that people are going to keep buying the strongest card no matter how much energy it uses. There's a lot of rumors, and I've certainly heard the same, that Lovelace could push things past 400 watts. And I think there's going to be like a 350 watt at least RDNA 3 card. I think there will be. Because why not? People will buy it. And if they do that, AIBs are going to make giant coolers. So it's not just aesthetic. There are real reasons they're doing it. But I will say I have talked to some distributors that think people do just think bigger cards are stronger. So there's a part of it that I believe is that, or at least AIBs think that's true. If it is true, if it's the cart getting before the horse, if it's like like, what do I like? There's so many examples I could bring of this, of like Hollywood saying we can't put these types of people in a movie, no one will buy tickets, and movie, like Black Panther sells like crazy. Turns out you were wrong. Is it that AIBs are going, we think people want bigger cards, and so we're only making bigger cards? Or are they actually seeing data that suggests that? Or are they misreading the data? Are AIBs saying, well, people keep buying our big cards? Well, yeah, those are cool the best. It's not because they're big. It's hard to say, but at the very least, whatever dynamic is making it happen, the market's buying bigger cards, AIBs are making bigger cards, and AMD and Nvidia are making higher energy using cards. So cards are getting bigger. They just are. I think there will always be reference cards that can fit in a normal case, but we're going to kind of be at the mercy of AMD and Nvidia for how many they produce. Like, I had a real problem testing that 6800 XT that I reviewed early this year. If I got a 6800 XT, I'd have to make sure it's a reference one basically, or won't fit in my case. And my case isn't tiny. It's compact. It's not tiny though. Never thought I'd have to worry about fitting a high-end card in a case that's, like this big, but I guess I do. And to the point where I would almost have to consider just getting professional cards to fit it in. I think a normal sized case, but that's what the market's saying. And, with the removal of Crossfire and SLI, I think you also go, most people have a lot of extra space, so might as well make it bigger, right? I mean, all right, where did I start that? I should probably talked about that for like a while. I should put that down for cards getting bigger as a timestamp for sure. All right, let me see what's going on with the chat. I want to make sure I don't miss any tipped questions. I talked for a long time there. Okay, there's one. Nice Charge Our shirt. Here's some free money. Thank you for the tip, man. Appreciate it. Let's see. So, okay, I think I got all the tipped questions. Let me continue down the Patreon questions then. And remember, you can continue to tip. Okay, well, there's one right there. And it kind of is connected to what I was talking about. So let's answer that right now. 3090 Super, right? Camaro 85 says, any info on the 3090 Super? My 3090 Gaming X Trail has only one BIOS, so I don't want to brick it to get resizable bar support. What doesn't it? Sizable bar support, isn't that on all Ampere cards? Am I missing something here? But any info on the 3090 Super? Unless you mean you want a backup card in case you brick it. Yeah, no, I don't. And I've seen some people suggest that there's no way that's coming out. So I'm not going to firmly say one way or another anything about the 3090 Super, but if I was 100% sure it was launching, I would have done a video, wouldn't I have? That's definitely something that would get clicks. So let's be honest, guys. All right, I've already done the console talk, so let's get out of that. All right, Z. Let me put down. Oh, you've been leaking a lot of intels. Let's see here. Let me see. When should I answer this question? I'll answer this now. Wargamer gave me a tip. Thank you. He says, greetings, Tom. You've been leaking a lot of Intel's future architectures like Lunar and Nova Lake. Do you have anything on Zen 5 or even Zen 6? So, I mean, I don't know that I even need to put a timestamp. I'll say this. I mean, guys, I don't think. Notice that I didn't even bother to like make a full specs sheet for like Nova Lake, right? Or Lunar Lake. And that's because things are going to change. At the end of the day, anything, I'm going to say it again. This comes from an Intel contact, and I had an AMD contact confirm that's basically how it works in their company. Anything that's about a year and a half to 2 years out is locked in stone, basically. The only thing that can change is segmentation, maybe canceling some of the dies or something like that, right? Once you're a year out, it's done for the most part, outside of insane situations where NVIDIA rapidly ported Maxwell. And even then, that took like over a year. So, like, ported Maxwell to 28 nanometer from 20 nanometers. So, like, anything that's a year and a half out is pretty much locked in stone, and that's why I leaked Raptor Lake, because I know what it's going to be. Like, I'm not concerned now. I'm happy to talk about it. But the second you get 2 to 3 years away, it's in finalization. There can still be some pretty big changes made. like, oh, we're dropping support for this. Oh, it turns out we're not going to go up to that. The overall architecture is done, but there are still decent changes that can be made 2 to 3 years out. And then 4 years out, it's pathfinding. It's like literally as different as, should we drop support for this instruction set if it means we can optimize like Nova Lake for this much higher of an, can we get more IPC if we drop support for this type of an application? Or like, these are radical differences that can happen 4 years out. So, and it's like, what's going to be in this? There's no way you can be sure. Even Intel isn't 100% sure what's in Nova Lake right now. And the same goes for Zen 6. All of this is to say, I leaked info about Lunar Lake and Nova Lake because I just want to make sure people had an idea of how radically better it's going to be and what's on the table for what they're doing. But you can't be 100% sure of the final numbers, not even remotely sure, for years from now. And honestly, within AMD, they're not even talking about Zen 5. Like, all focus is on Zen 4 right now. And frankly, Zen 3D and RDNA 3, that's the focus at AMD right now. They want a winner with RDNA 3. They want to see if they can pull up Zen 3D as much as possible to compete with Alder Lake. They're not talking about Zen 5, guys. And the changes and what they learn competing with Alder Lake, with Raptor Lake, may make Zen 6 a radically different architecture than what they initially were planning. So, like, again, it's like I told you what was in Lunar and Nova Lake, in so much as what you should expect in the performance increases, which is that it's going to be huge. But don't expect some full spec sheet for this stuff right now. Who's calling me? So let me put down a thing for that. Zen 6 expectations. We'll call that timestamp, why don't we? Let me continue down with these questions here. Let me see here. Sorry, guys. Let me turn off my phone here. All right. Raymond Shamus writes in and says, graphics cards are as big as they are right now, should have 2 GPUs on them and giant copper coolers. Well, copper is more expensive than aluminum, my friend. If they think it, so perfect example of what I said about why cards are getting bigger. If they use a copper heatsink this big, you'll probably cool about as well as an aluminum one this big, but the aluminum one is cheaper. And so if they can save $10 making this card, and it's bigger, and then it also turns out people think bigger cards are stronger, that's what they're going to do. And I agree, copper heat sinks look awesome, but they're also really heavy and expensive. And heavy doesn't just mean heavy for your PC, it means heavy to ship. Costs more to ship these cards to Newegg and from Newegg. Michael Lai writes in and says, love you, Tom. Been a subscriber since 20,000. Oh, that's quite a while ago. I believe 20,000 was hit at the end of 2019. It's a long time ago. He says, keep up the good work, and I can't wait till next year. It's going to be a wild ride. Indeed. Thank you for the tip. All right, let me continue with the Patreon question. So we have some, let's see, let's go back up then. We have some supply questions here. Let me put a timestamp here, put supply. So Timo H writes in, just like you guys can for free if you support us on Patreon. And he says, first question, and the AMD drop came today on their website, and I had no luck. In 30 minutes, everything was gone. Although, to be fair, they aren't even selling 6600 XTs. What will September, October, and onwards look like in terms of actual products and news cycle perspective? I'm referring to mentions of August being heavy in news content. Oh, yeah, I did say that, right? So, I mean, honestly, we're getting into September. We're a month out from Alder Lake. Alder Lake is going to dominate the headlines. And I think you're going to see some pretty concrete, comprehensive leaks about Zen 3D, whether from me or someone else, in October as well. Whether intentionally leaked from AMD or not, by the way. For sure, I think we're going to get some firm info on Zen 3D. And frankly, if I was AMD, I would try to paper launch whatever they call it, right? The 6950X, the 5950 XT. If I was AMD, I would want to paper launch that and get it into X570 motherboards right away for reviews. Even if you can't buy it till January, I would do everything I could to try to steal the limelight from Alder Lake. And I think that's what we're going to be seeing. All of this talk about Alder Lake and Zen 3D. And this is also going to be next to Chagall, which Zen 3 Threadripper should be, I believe I leaked, coming out in November. So I think we're gonna have a late year Threadripper. I asked people, I know it's been a little quiet, but I've asked a couple sources, say that's still coming, right? And they're like, yeah, as far as we know. So Threadripper non-pro should still be coming out by the end of this year. And I think AMD is going to position that against Alder Lake. I think they're gonna possibly launch a 16 core um a 16 core Threadripper for Zen 3. I'm not, I think they might, and that they might charge a little less than you'd expect to be for multi-threading against Alder Lake. Some people are saying flickering. Nothing I can do about it. Blame YouTube, man. There's nothing I can check, dude. The stream started. There's literally nothing I can do about it. Like it's plugged in, you know. Like, there's nothing if you're having flickering, I can't do anything about it. That is YouTube, guys. It's a live stream. You just accept worse video quality. Hopefully the sound is okay. But yeah, that's what I think you should expect. It's gonna be that just got blurry because I touched it. You should expect some really heavy competition, leaks, rumors, discussions about Zen 3D, Alder Lake, and Threadripper. And I think going into next year, also Z. I mean, guys, XE is coming out in Q1 next year. So I've held back on doing another ARC video because I want it to be, um, I want to have something big to say. I'm kind of forming what I will have as my next ARC video. Kind of what should you expect? But let's be honest, I feel like I'm gonna get comprehensive info within a month, and again, anyways. So, like, I might as well wait for that. Let me at least try and make it not blurry, huh? That's a little better. But yeah. So it's all gonna be Z, Alder Lake, and that sort of news. Let me put that expectations. And in terms of supply, Timo, because I think that was your main question, guys, I don't know how many times every report I've done on supply has been no matter how much is supplied, it's not going to be enough for demand. I think we definitely got way more cards in August than the previous months. There's just no doubt about it. For the first time in months, you could buy a 3060. The 6600 XT was actually at MSRP for some of its volume, but it sold out instantly. I think we need several more months like this month before we see a consistent dropping in prices. And I think it's going to be very uneven in terms of pricing coming down. I think some cards like the 3070 Ti and 3080 are just going to be expensive for a very long time. I think you'll see maybe the 3090 get close to MSRP, but that's because it's already so marked up, Like, I think things are going to slowly get better for about a month now, but you have to remember we're also going into a holiday season, so it's just going to be very inconsistent. It's going to be probably better than this summer, but it's not going to feel much better because it still pretty much sucks. Um, but yeah, so Calvin Weaver writes in and he says, I have a 3950X. I felt like the 3950 to the 5950 was like the 1700 to the 2700. Well, it was actually a much larger jump than that. But if the 5953 X3D is to a 3950X is the 37 to 1700, I'll buy. Well, I mean, guys, look at it this way, right? Uh, do the math. At the Zen 2 only increased IPC by like 15% over Zen 1. Zen 3 increased at 20%. Some games 30% higher frame rates than Zen 2. So if you're just a gamer, Zen 3 was actually, I would argue, a bigger deal than Zen 2. And then if you want to just multiply it out, so let's just call it 1.2 to be conservative, and then call Zen 3D another 15%. So that means you're looking at 38% higher IPC in Zen 3D over Zen 2. That's huge. To put it another way, let's say it'd be the same as if 1.25 times 1.1, right? Oh yeah, yeah. That would be about the same, right? As if AMD went to 20 cores with 10% higher IPC. A 20, well, not quite, that'd be 20% more cores or something, right? Like if you were to add 4 more cores and add 10% more IPC, I think people will go, oh, Zen, whatever you want to call it, 3.5 is a huge deal. They increase core counts and IPC again. But if you just increase IPC by 38%, Zen 3D is really final Zen 3. That's a bigger deal than if they actually increased IPC by 10% and core counts by a little bit. So what I would say then is if you have a 3950X like I do, and you're wondering if a 5950 X3D will feel like a huge leap, Absolutely, it will. It'll feel like at least as big of a leap. If you need the performance, though. See, that's the caveat, isn't it? Isn't right? Because the problem is, I have a the problem. It's a nice problem to have. I have a 3950X. It's 16 cores that run at like 4.3 gigahertz all core or so, usually while I'm gaming, or at least for the amount of cores that are used. I guess not all cores are at 4.3 gigahertz, but like half of them are or something. I'm not having any trouble hitting 120 hertz in all of my games. So it would probably be a bit easier if I had Zen 3 or Zen 3D. But at the end of the day, I think Zen 2 felt so much better than Zen 1 or Zen Plus simply because it really, was that extra bit to hit 120 hertz. But once you've hit 120 hertz, and games only are getting better multi-threaded, so they're taking better use of Zen 2 now as well than they were a few years ago. I can't promise you a Zen 3D chip's gonna feel like a bigger increase than Zen 2 because Zen 2 just hit that mark. It's not like a GPU where you can always turn on more. You can in some games to use the CPU more, but for the most part, CPU performance, either you have enough for a certain frame rate or you don't, and Zen 2 hit what you needed. So look, Zen 3D over Zen 2 is as big of a deal as Zen 2 over Zen 1. It is. And if you think about it, Zen 2 came 2 years after Zen 1. Zen 3D is in 2021, so it's coming 2 years after Zen 2. Actually, I think it would still be technically less than 2 years, and it will be as big of a deal. So, and if that doesn't impress you, I would just suggest you don't need to upgrade, man. And I'm not going to make myself upgrade until I see a need for it. It's funny, I'm using the same RAM sticks since Skylake. They're at 3600 megahertz. They run great. And until I see my apps really filling up the RAM consistently, I'm not going to worry about it. At that point, I'll probably just get DDR5 and Raptor Lake or Zen 4 or something. Um, Let me see then. So I talked about that one for a while. Interesting. Is it flickering when I scroll? Let me see here. So we got another question here for Dr. Forbin. Tom, I really do love what you do and enjoy your channel. It's why I subscribe, as everyone else should, on Patreon. Thank you for plugging me, Dr. Forbin. You recently made a comment about angry members who say, and I quote, me angry because can't get graphics card. I think that what you are hearing is frustration regarding the state of the PC market, space, supply, demand regarding GPUs, and absolutely bonkers pricing. I absolutely understand the frustration. Again, my next guest manages a studio, and he said he can't even get enough PS5s and 3080s for his people to test the new Dune game. It's affecting everybody. It sucks. It sucks. It just sucks. There's no way around it. And I understand that. And he says it doesn't help when tech tubers like Linus say things like high GPU prices are our consumers' faults. Yeah, I mean, I'm torn on that one though, because to a certain extent it's true. People keep buying graphics cards. Like I said, I was talking to this guy at Funcom, and he's like, we can't get enough PS5s. And it's like, PS5s aren't being used to mine, guys. It's gamers buying up most of the stuff. It is. And I don't know what to tell you though. Like if you're mad that me or Linus say that. I would suggest it's not worth rubbing it in, but it is what it is. People want to upgrade. We're during a pandemic too. It makes sense why people are willing to pay more. People are stuck inside now more. So, you know, but it is what it is, though. I really don't know what else to say besides that. I agree that some people could do a better job, but I also think that there's a large amount of people that are just feeding into the outrage and making it worse. I also feel like there's a lot of channels that just piss on every graphics card that comes out, call AMD evil, call AIBs evil, and there's no real desire to explain what's going on or to understand. And I don't understand what the point of that is. Like, how many times can you just get mad about the same thing before it doesn't just get counterproductive, it gets boring? When do you get bored of getting mad? Because I'm bored of it. I got bored of it in 2019 when people were complaining that AMD was going to charge 450 for the 5700 XT and then back down the price, which that looks quaint now, doesn't it? That we complained about that. I'm bored of it. I'm bored of the complaining. It just, what I try to do is explain why things are and explain when something is competitively segmented, like the 6600 XT analysis I did. It's competitive against the 3060. That doesn't mean I like it, right? It is, though. It costs less on the street. It outperforms it. It's more efficient. It's a better card, but it costs more than I think it should. I'm not going to yell at them though, because people bought it up in droves. It is what it is, guys. I just don't know what you want me to say. I get the anger, and I think outrage is a bit strong of a word, but you know, I think talking about what makes something competitive and why things are the way they are is far more interesting than yelling. So that's all I can say about that. And I certainly understand where people are coming from. Okay. Lars Hansen writes in, how big of a setback will it be for Nvidia if their purchase of ARM is blocked by the EU and US competition authorities? Let me put this down as a timestamp. ARM deal. ARM plus Nvidia. I mean, it's how do we put this, right? Because I think in the short term, it wouldn't hurt Nvidia that much. Well, it wouldn't hurt us because it's not like they were going to make ARM gaming chips anytime soon. But at the same time, I mean, they're making big plans clearly, like they're going to own ARM. It would really affect their ability. They would really affect a lot of money they've spent. I think they'd still find ways to get around it and work with ARM to make this stuff, but it'd be a big problem for Nvidia mid to long term. Clearly, buying ARM is a key part of their ongoing long term strategy at this point. If it was blocked, it'd be a huge issue. And there's multiple reasons it might be. There's anti-competitive reasons, monopolistic reasons. The people within ARM do not want to be owned by Nvidia. This is like consistent. I haven't done any video on it, but I'm letting you know. Anyone I've talked to connected to ARM says they dread being owned by Nvidia. They know they're going to move jobs overseas. That's why the UK government doesn't want it to happen. The UK government sees having ARM located in the UK for most of its design work is a national security issue. So there's very real reasons to make it block, guys. And it would be a big problem for Nvidia. But I'm not one of those people that's going to bet on it either way. Calvin Weaver, thank you for your input. Thank you for the tip, Calvin. Let me see here. Mark Smith writes in, thank you for the tip. Hi, Tom. I hope all is well. Well, the flickering's kind of annoying. Could be better. He says, do you think Nvidia is using their super intro to combat buzz around Intel Xe and also increase MSRP of GPUs again? There are always rumors of a super series. Here's what I'm going to say. There's been rumors of an Ampere 30 super series since before the 3080 came out, guys. There were rumors of, so where are they? It's been a year, no super. So I would hesitate to double down on when exactly a super's coming out. Heck, there were rumors about 3080 Ti coming out for months, and then it just kept getting pushed back and pushed back. Some of that I think was bad rumors. Some of that was Nvidia did just push it back. I know they did eventually just push it back, and that is true for some of them. In terms of Nvidia trying to increase prices, they don't need to. They've won. People are going to buy their cards at inflated prices. Nvidia doesn't need to do anything. They've won. Nvidia wins. Prices are here to stay. They've won. I don't think they need to introduce a super to increase pricing. I think all they need to do is only produce the 3070 Ti in large numbers, only produce the 3080 Ti in large numbers, reduce supply of 3080s, use 3080 dies for mining cards. They have ways of doing this without introducing a super series. A big reason the 3070 Ti was introduced for more money than a 6800 that has double the RAM and is stronger is because they knew they could due to supply. That's why. And if you'll notice, by the way, AMD hasn't been shipping a lot of 6800 cards, have they? It's for a reason. They don't need that many disabled dies that much. 25% disabled. Most of them don't need to be disabled that much. So, these companies have ways of kind of manipulating pricing without manipulating pricing with a new card. Now, if Nvidia introduces a super series, I'm under the impression it may be like an early either die shrink of Ampere or Lovelace situation, like 7050 Ti. And I think they would conceivably do that around the Xe launch, just like AMD may launch a 6-nanometer refresh right after Xe's out. Yeah, they might both do that to combat Xe, but I don't think they need to launch a 3090 super to fight Z. I don't think Xe has any chance of competing with the 3090. If it does, I'll be blown away. That's not happening. So I don't think they need a full super series to combat Arc. I think it'd be better to just release some new lower end card when they can. I talked about that for long enough, I think. Super series. Okay. Raymond Chamas writes in, what does everyone think about right to repair? Look up Louise Rosman and iPad Rehab on YouTube. Um, I mean, look, guys, I think people should be allowed to own what they buy. Like, crazy idea, I guess, but I really don't have anything else to say besides that. It's funny. It's like, what's your take on right to repair? Well, my take is people should own what they buy. It's a common, easy answer. I really have nothing else to add. I mean it in as simple as those terms. You own what you buy. Now, does that mean you should be able to like hack into the online infrastructure of Apple or Xbox or PlayStation? I don't know. That's where it gets dicey. But I think you should be allowed to repair and take anything you own apart. You should. Okay. That's 100% true. It's up to those companies once you take it apart, I suppose, if they want to take some features away, but that's a slippery slope. Pretty soon they're basically bricking it if you take it apart, anyways. But yeah, I like your room. No, thank you, Jacob Manning. All right. Let me continue um, with the Patreon question. So Falto writes in and he says, which quarter do you think they will release NVIDIA GPUs next year? Well, this is a classic situation of what NVIDIA GPUs? I don't think they're going to have the full lineup and supply of Lovelace till the end of next year. I just have zero evidence that's happening. Having said that, every AIB is sure NVIDIA is going to have something if RDNA 3 comes out sooner than expected. So what I would say is, what quarter will NVIDIA release new GPUs? The quarter they need to stay competitive. When will they have the full, or should I say a lot of the Lovelace lineup out? Maybe not the full one. Obviously, they won't have them all out at the same time. You know, by the end of next year, I think. I think so, because I think it's pretty obvious RDNA 3 is coming quarter 3 next year, around there, and that there could be a refresh on 6 nanometer before that. And I just don't see NVIDIA ignoring that. So I think you're going to see some NVIDIA launches all year if it's necessary. I know that sounds a little like a cop out, but that's the truth. Oh, don't forget to like, guys. I see over 700 people watching. Hopefully we can get over 700 likes. Now, Alex also writes in from Patreon, and he says, now NVIDIA and AMD have got away with extremely high prices for the last 2 years, along with pricing rumors for next-gen GPUs. Is it possible NVIDIA especially will never go back? And that they follow the Apple business practice that for 2,000-pound phones that we can't afford? Too bad, you penniless peasant. Just pay 2,000 quid if you want to. Anyways, keep up the good work. Best British pounds I've spent on Patreon. Thank you, Alex. I would say, I've said it for a while, turning prices are here to stay. I think there's just no way around it. And the final convincer, although it's not like I needed a lot of convincing of that, but like the final thing that makes me very confident is just inflation. Like every AIB is like, hey guys, inflation. So we're not going back. And now we have an excuse that people will probably go along with. So at the end of the day, I think how high prices get is going to depend on how competitive Intel is and in the GPU space, and at what point people decide they don't care about more performance. It's very clear that a lot of people were waiting for like mainstream 4K gaming. And if you look at what's happening with like the 3070, the 6700 XT, although 3070 really should have more RAM, it's here. It's easy for me to run 4K, honestly, on the 3070. Unfortunately, some games I need to turn down textures or something, or even some games I just can't run it in full 4K or it will break the buffer. But you know, at the end of the day, I can play that level of performance around a 2080 Ti is definitely enough for 4K 60. And it's pretty standard now on mid-range cards and higher. So I think Nvidia and AMD got away with charging more for this gen because of the demand that was spurred on by a pandemic. And I think that they may hope, I don't know, we'll see, get more resistance though when they're like, hey, guess what? Now we have something this strong. And it's like, yeah, but it still looks good. I can run 4K, I'm happy. Or I can run 1440p 120, which is crazy easy on my 3070 to do with reasonable settings. Will people keep wanting more performance? Some people will. I think the enthusiast market is going to stay at 1,000 or higher because they've proven that's how much they'll pay. But if things keep going up, there's something's going to have to give at a certain point, because like if their gaming cards got any more expensive at Nvidia, they'd start encroaching on their A series, right? Go look at the A5000. It's like a 3080 level of performance, kind of, with less energy usage for 2,500. So 3080 is only 10% weaker than a 3090. The 3090 AIB cards are close to A5000 pricing, and it's probably only like a 3090 is probably only about 15-20% better than that. So if they were to make the 4090 2 grand, you're getting really close to what you would charge for an A series card. So I kind of feel like 2 grand is going to be somewhat of the limit for the enthusiast market. And I feel like the mid range is just going to be 600 to 700 from now on. And I think the low end is going to be 400. I'd be surprised if it went out of control so much as it just consistently stayed at that price for a bit. Again, especially if Intel releases something as strong as a 3070 Ti for like 400. If that happens, then there's kind of a cap on how much they can go out of control. But keep in mind, guys, a 3070 Ti is only like 20% better than a 6700 XT. So if Intel launches a 3070 Ti for 400, well, if AMD refreshes on 6 nanometer with the 6700 XT to the 7600 XT, I mean, they could launch something 10% weaker than Intel on 6 nanometer with just a rebrand probably for 350 for a 7600 XT if they wanted to. So that's why Intel kind of has to be more aggressive with XE because they're not going to be competing just with RDNA 2 on 7 nanometer. They're going to be competing with the next gen. DG3 will come out after Lovelace and RDNA 3. So they've got to price it with that in mind. But yeah, so let me see. I answered that question. Yeah, I think there's definitely something here when I scroll for when the questions move. There's something with the YouTube feed, unfortunately. I don't know that I've ever seen that before, but hopefully it just won't show up in the final video. Let's see. Let's see. Jinx writes in and asks, should Nvidia and AMD worry about the GPU supply issues hurting interest in PC gaming long term? Could mining kill PC gaming? Let me put down a timestamp kind of what the previous thing I said was to, GPU ceiling pricing. So should Nvidia and AMD worry about GPU supply hurting interest in PC gaming long term? It's hard. You have to be very careful about how I answer this question because I think that there's no doubt that the increasing prices, the supply issues, just how hard it is to build a PC right now if you want to, is hurting how many people would be PC gaming. I've had on Call Moriarty from Sacred Symbols, a PlayStation podcast, and he says a lot of people that joined his Patreon were people that said they don't want to buy a $1,000 PC. And I'm going to have on Maddie Plays this year from the Xbox Colin's Last Stand podcast. I'll have an Xbox podcast guy on, which he's Defining Duke's very good. I'll plug that for him too. If you like Xbox, Defining Duke's a great podcast, just like Sacred Symbols is for PlayStation. And whether you ask Maddie or you ask Colin, they're seeing this influx of PC centric people into console. Now, are these the hardcore PC people? I think it's people that maybe thought of themselves as hardcore, but they weren't as hardcore as they thought, right? Like I'm really into PCs. I'm always going to have a desktop, even if just for work. But I think a lot of people built PCs, and I've said this so many times, I'll say it again, between 2013 and 2016 because it was like the best time of price performance ever. Like, my God, usually when a new console gen comes out, they crush PC and price performance for the first year. The PS4 was better price performance, but it wasn't as much better as like the 360 or PS3 were. It's pretty competitive PC gaming back then. You could get a mid-range graphics card in 2014 for like $200 or less that was stronger than the PS4. So put that in perspective. If you wanted a 7870 in 2013, it'd probably be $300 depending on what part of the year. So $300 for something it's less money than buying the console. If you're a PC gamer and you don't want any of the exclusive games on consoles, then you go, yeah, it's cheaper to upgrade my PC easily. And undoubtedly, if you had an i3 or better, you had a CPU that was as good as the consoles for at least a few years. Although eventually you did need a quad core, let's be honest, on PC. So, or more than 4 cores, more than 4 threads, frankly, if you ask me, even for Battlefield 4 multiplayer. But anyways, I digress. I think a lot of people built PCs then because it did make more sense. And on the one hand, right now, you have a lot of people just buying up everything that shows up. So if you were to say, is this hurting interest in PC gaming? Doesn't seem like it. Everything sells. Everything sells. And it's not just to miners, guys. Overwhelming majority are going to gamers. I think over half of Ampere is going to gamers. I think 75% or more of AMD is going to gamers. Gamers are buying most of these graphics cards. I know people hype up these, Twitter things on slow news days. It's the only reason that's being talked about. It's a slow news day. So you could make the argument that there's no evidence raising prices is hurting interest in PC gaming, but I have to believe it's hurting what it could be. So maybe the amount of PC gamers isn't going down. If anything, it's going up. But at the end of the day, it's not going down. So it's hard to say for sure. But long term, I think PC gaming would have grown more if there weren't these issues. Does that make sense? That's what I think's going on. And do I think it's going to kill PC gaming? No. There's been shortages before. There's been expensive PCs before. At least listen to the recent PC Perspective Broken Silicon, where we kind of go over how much more expensive PCs were in the past. I saw some people go, well, that's different. Not, kinda. I don't know. I mean, a low end PC in the 90s was $2,000. This for like fourth or in the 80s too. Like we looked at like an inflation calculator, like a low end PC in today's money was $4,000 back then. So in the early 90s. So like we can complain, but it used to be a lot more. And there's no reason I unfortunately think we should expect PC gaming to be as cheap as it was 10 years ago. 10 years ago was called the PC gaming golden age. People said the PC gaming renaissance happened in 2011 or something. Renaissances don't last forever, right? You can't have a PC gaming renaissance that lasts 50 years. Now it's a little more so for the hardcore again. But it's also like, do you need the best graphics? See, that's the thing though, too, is it's like it's not like if you get a 6600 XT, you have that much to complain about. You've got a 150 watt card that runs every game maxed out in 1080p at ridiculously high frame rates, is okay in 1440p. It's hard to complain when you can still, like in the 90s, you couldn't even run new games if your card was a few years old. Like it's ridiculous. So that's what I would say. Is it hurting PC gaming? Well, it's not good for getting new people into PC gaming, these prices. Is it going to kill it? No. And it's been worse before. And I do think it will get better by the end of next year for sure. But right now is just a bad time to build. It just is. If you have to upgrade, you have to. I understand. But it's just a bad time to build a whole new PC right now. Unless you already have a graphics card and you're like, getting Alder Lake or Zen 3, then it's like, well, those prices aren't the worst. But yeah. Anyways, enough of that. Sharper Robin writes in and he says, I got a Vega 56 for $200 2.5 years ago. Yep. Which most developers I talk to still pretty much target Vega 56 performance pretty much is what they want for like high settings at, 1080p 60 or something, or, 1440p medium. He goes, I sold it for 600 and bought a 6700 XT for 750. What the hell? Why can I sell Vega for 3x its price and buy the 6700 XT for only 1.5x? Well, Vega's really good at mining. Vega's really good at editing. Vega's really good at rendering. Vega has uses. Vega, if you underclock, is actually still, because of HBM. HBM has like a floor in power usage that's lower than GDR6 even. So it's efficient if you tweak it, really efficient. And that's why, and it's just someone who saw a 67, or, honestly, almost everyone buying Vegas on eBay are miners. Every Vega, like, and I followed up with people that bought them. It's like, and they'll send me a picture of their mining rig with the Radeon 7 in it. And it's like, I miss that Radeon 7, but if a miner is willing to pay $2,000 for this card, I mean, have fun, And it's like, I really don't think a lot of gamers are buying Vegas right now. I don't. I think some big gamers are maybe buying those $200 Polaris cards to just slum it, but I don't think a lot of them are buying Vegas. And that's why you can sell it for that much. Thank God RDNA 2 isn't massively better at mining, right? Let me see here. John, hope I say this. Johan Doden Edgren writes in. Hope I said that right. Pretty sure I got at least two of them right. Tom, did you see the Cortex clip of Radeon GPUs? Well, first of all, Cortex blocks me for some bizarre reason, so I can't see most things. I'll never understand people that just yell and then block someone on Twitter. It seems very childish to me. But so I don't usually see anything he posts because of that. But mining supplier. Anyways, he says, if you're not, you should look. AMD needs gaming market share. So AMD is selling graphics cards from their website, guys, right now. Nvidia is not. So AMD is trying to get cards to gamers. And by the way, those Radeon GPUs, I'm told, did not come from AIBs or AMD. They came from a retailer, like a Micro Center. So a Micro Center, I don't know if it was a Micro Center, but let's say a Micro Center gets a shipment of graphics cards. What it really probably is a mom and pop shop that's like Micro Center, like a mom and pop PC shop that's fairly large. That's what I would peg as having those cards, right? And this doesn't just come from my assumption. I've talked to a couple people about it who can tell me where the cards came from. Those cards came from some mom and pop version of a Micro Center who set up a deal to probably sell all of them to a mid-sized miner for an inflated price. So they're like, hey, we're going to sell you all these cards for $1,000 instead of 900 if you buy them all at once. And the miner said, okay. There's not much AMD can do about that. A mom and pop shop is allowed to sell these cards for whatever they want. That's not AIBs. If it was coming from AIBs directly, it would not have the marketing packaging on it. Think about it. And think about those cards. They were from 3 different AIBs. So if AMD was shipping these to miners, why wouldn't they just ship their reference cards? If these were coming from AIBs, why wouldn't they be the cheapest coolers and only from one AIB? What AIB is shipping 3 different AIB cards of different models? What happened is a retailer sold all of them at once to a miner. That's what that is. So if you want to get mad at Micro Centers, and that is a big problem. Selling cards out the back door of Micro Centers and Best Buys for inflated prices. That's a huge problem right now, I'm told by people at Micro Centers, that and Micro Centers cracking down on it, but that's what that is. That's not AMD shipping marketing. Why would they ship marketing materials with them? They would have been closely packaged in little brown boxes, guys. This is why you've got to be careful about the outrage and just, clickbait tweets are that. They're just trying to get clickbait, but it was a retailer who did it, guys. And it's unfortunate some people just, again, there's a lot of YouTube channels just playing into outrage because they can. I just try to actually tell you what I can dig up. So Apple Ash writes in and he says, Intel keeps mentioning Alchemist as an SoC. Is this just Intel's way of saying it can be a network attached GPU? Or is there all more to it? Any benefit to the consumer? I mean, I want to talk about this one more time. I talked about it early on. There will be a link in the description because I found it before we started. I just think it's hilarious. Has anyone seen this marketing from Intel on Alchemist? Like they have like I don't know, not Dungeons and Dragons even, but like a fantasy looking character called the Alchemist, who's the graphics card. All of Intel's marketing department needs to be fired. It's like they think we're all a bunch of, I mean, I don't know how to put it right. LARPing people, like, and there's nothing wrong with LARPing. You could argue done LARPing before. But it's like Intel's just like, I think the Alchemist thing is literally just them thinking gamers will buy it if they say it's some fantasy character. That's really it. I mean, think about it. Intel Z or Intel Xe, Intel Arc, Intel Alchemist. Xe, what's going on? You have like 5 names. And I don't know. I think it's just the marketing department going wild. I don't, as an SoC, I don't know. What I know is what I know is the DG2 Gen architecture will be put into more than just desktop and laptop cards. Does that make sense? You're going to see it in APUs. They might use a tile from it in a server chip. I did that leak on a design for a Sapphire Rapids that had an Xe tile. Could that be what they mean, using it for that? But without seeing the direct quote, I can't say much more. And I'm tempted to say that I don't want to talk about Intel marketing besides saying Intel marketing is just the cringiest crap I've ever seen in my life. And you should hear what they're doing behind the scenes. They I don't know. The way I've had it described to me is it's like a bunch of 50-year-olds trying to relate to Gen Z is their marketing department. It's like really cringy stuff, even behind the scenes, frankly. Uh, all right. Felix Fortuna writes in, do you think the Steam Deck, if very successful, will push PC gaming in a new direction in terms of both hardware and software? Let's put down a timestamp for the Steam Deck. Why don't we? I hmm. I want this. Well, I want almost any gaming product. I want most gaming products to do well. I want more competition. I want more experimentation. So everything I'm about to say needs to be prefaced with I'm not rooting against the Steam Deck. I like it. I have concerns though. Like you say, if the Steam Deck is successful, has anyone considered how many Steam Decks can they even make per quarter? Right? Do you guys think Valve has bought up even a tenth the capacity of Sony for PlayStation 5s or let alone iPhones or if like it seems like Lovelace will be made on TSMC 5 nanometer. Who do you think's buying up more capacity? Nvidia for Lovelace with graphics cards that are like 700 millimeters squared or whatever they're going to make it, or Van Gogh chips? They're smaller, but who is taking up most of the capacity? That's kind of one of my concerns about the Steam Deck. I haven't heard anyone say. If it is wildly successful, then how many can they even make? Right? Aren't they only launching with like a couple 100,000 or something? Uh, that's my concern about the Steam Deck is even if it's a wild success, I hesitate to believe they'll be able to sell more than even like 5 million in the first year because they can't even make more than that much. Right? Because like isn't the PS5 get already sold, I believe, 10 million. So it'll probably sell like 20 million. I think they announced they want to try to sell in its first year of sales, first 12 months. Are we to believe the Steam Deck will be able to make as many, even sell 10 million? I kind of doubt it. It's a smaller die, but I still like kind of doubt it. I that's something no one's talking about. Um, and I've heard from some people that they expect it to be a scalper's dream, the Steam Deck. So pre-order it if you want it. I'm telling you. Because of how hard it's going to be to get, possibly, at least at first. Now, do I, and so I just think its success is a bit limited. And if it is wildly successful, the follow up will be the one that has large manufacturing and, will actually capture a ton of market share. But will it push PC gaming in a new direction? I don't, I don't know. I think it's the first good try at a portable PC gaming device. There's other ones, don't get me wrong, that looked really good, but they're like all $1,000. And this being priced kind of like a console is, closer to cost than usual for one of these devices. Like it's not a Kickstarter campaign where they're only going to sell 10,000. Hey, I say they might not be able to make as many as, other consoles, but at the end of the day, they're at least able to make probably millions, which is unlike previous Windows portable gaming devices. So I think all of that could be a proving ground for if this market can really succeed, because there's just never been a really good try at it. But in terms of will it push PC gaming in a new direction? I don't know. I'm not sold that it'll push it in a new direction so much as finally serve a market that's been underserved. And portable PC gaming has been criminally underserved. And they're going to want to make as many as they can, if you ask me, because I do think the follow up to the Switch, whether it's called the Super Switch or the Switch 2, is going to be, you know, compete with it pretty well in performance and probably be out within a year after, well, within a year and a half after the Steam Deck launches. Deco writes him. He says, do you think DG2 will run into the same supply issues as RDNA 2 and Ampere? This is such a loaded question. So let me put down a timestamp for this. Will Z have supply issues? Guys, anything I say needs to be understood that everything is in tight supply right now. They can't even make enough cars. So keep that in mind with what I'm about to say. Having said that, I do know that Intel is stockpiling just a shit ton of RAM and other components right now, and they have been for a while. That I actually believe they wanted to launch Xe in Q4 this year, but the drivers just aren't ready, and they needed to make sure it's a good launch. So I think they're going to have a lot of supply compared to AMD, at least. Compared to Nvidia, hard to say, maybe, but I don't know if it'll be enough. And I think they're really going to target the sub 300 and sub $400 market. I think they might actually have a good $150 card for the first time. And honestly, what, 5 years? Like, I mean, it's been a while. So, I mean, you can say Polaris was always good, but it's like, yeah, but it was just Polaris for so many years. Like, we're gonna have the first good sub $200 card that's brand new in a long time. I think that's gonna sell like hotcakes if it turns out even half decent. So, will they run into the same supply issues? No. Will they run into supply issues? Probably. Although it is launching right around when substrates should be getting better in supply. So I don't think they'll run into the same ones, but I'm not making any bets on things being in stock. You just can't do it. Um, Let me see what else there is here. Camaro 85 writes in and says, inflation is real, guys. Here in Austria, if you are 20 miles per hour over the speed limit, you now pay 150 euro compared to 70. Well, I don't think that's the same thing, though. I know a lot of states in the US charge wildly more or less for speed tickets. Like, man, Ohio, I know, and Wisconsin, they just want to get you for those speeding tickets compared to a lot of other states. It's absurd. A lot of that isn't inflation. That's the state deciding they can make money and no one complained. Like, just putting a bill through that's like, oh, we're going to charge more for speeding tickets. Is anyone going to oppose this? Nope. Got some more funding for the year. I don't know that that's inflation, but yeah, inflation is real. I just don't know that it's exactly related in the same way. Jake Sanders, any whispers about Xeon with only Gracemont derivatives, large numbers to compete with ARM servers? Maybe not Gracemont, but yes. I'm just going to leave it at that. Or maybe Gracemont. Yeah. Well, I mean, like, guys, what do you think Intel's going to do? What do you think Intel's going to do if Gracemont? What do you think Intel's going to do if they can get like 30% higher multi-threading performance for 4 little cores in the same die space as one Golden Cove core? Yes, there's a 64 core Emerald Rapids coming, 56 core Sapphire Rapids. What do you think they're going to do with the little cores? There's probably going to be something else. What have I been hinting at, guys? Come on. I basically all but said it. I just don't want to say everything because I don't want to reveal anything too soon that I've been told not to. And frankly, I don't think I think we know what Intel's going to do. We know Intel's going to make giant server chips with Atom cores, right? I mean, they are. So until we know exactly what it is, that's when I'll want to talk about it. IT consultancy writes in and says, works with some gaming. Would I buy a 50? Oh, so you do work with gaming. Okay. You work and game. And your question is, should I buy a 5800X or 5950X? Ethical hacking in 3 VMs, Linux, and maybe Windows. I got an i7 950 and I'm gaming on a 970. So obviously, any of these processors are going to be held back by your 970, unless you're doing like 720p gaming at 400 frames a second, which even then I think your 970 is going to hold you back compared to the processor. But I mean, if you think you will save money by getting the 5950X, I'd say get it. That's my easy advice. Let's see. Bad Dad writes in, but otherwise get a 5900X, right? Over the 5800X, right? Because the 5800X is only for gamers that want 8 cores. I'd say now that the 5900X seems to be in stock all the time, you should just get that or wait for Alder Lake, frankly. Bat Dad writes in and says, just got a promotion at work. Here's a tip for making sorting through material prices on a spreadsheet bearable with your podcast. Oh, thank you, Bat Dad. And remember, on Patreon, you'll get more podcasts. All right, let me continue down the Patreon questions. I actually haven't asked them all yet. Benjamin Cannon writes in and asks, chance of multi-GPU coming back with Intel in the market now, or is the 300 to 600 watt GPU replacing multi-GPU? I mean, honestly, I don't even know if we should say the 400 watt GPUs will replace multi-GPU so much as it's just where the market's going. And I mean, look, I never rule out the remote chance multi-GPU becomes more makes somewhat of a comeback in some games. Like I'm told that DirectX 12, yeah. What in the heck is going on with this? Let me see this here. I guess I'm going to moderate this person here. Okay, remove, remove, get rid of them. All righty. Anyways, though, this is an interesting thing here. Almost feels like someone coordinated this. Yeah, that was pretty funny. Well, I mean, people will be able to see that in the live chat why there was that delay. Yeah, I think there's definitely some coordinated thing. I wonder if Cortex is complaining again and just sending these people at me. He does that every now and then. Let's see, report. Yeah. At a certain point, though, we're just gonna have to keep going if there's spam like that, and YouTube's gonna have to sort it out in post. Um, yeah, there it is. It's starting to get flagged ahead of time. I need that. It flagged someone who said, "I need that white RTX 3090." That's pretty funny. We'll show it. We'll show you. We'll show you, John Elias. It's funny that it flagged you, but not the other people. Anyways, though, yeah, guys, look, could there be comebacks for multi GPU in certain specific applications? Yes, it's used in professional apps all the time still. And at the end of the day, I'm told in DirectX 12 that actually AMD cards with multi GPU kind of work pretty well in some games. But multi GPU is like being some ubiquitous thing like it was in the HD 5000, 6000, 4000 during the Fermi era from Nvidia. It's not coming back, guys. It's just not worth the efforts. I think it's just so clearly not coming back. Um, so that's that question. And Jan Benis writes in and says, "Hi, Tom. People assume that upcoming Intel GPUs will be cheap, or at least cheaper compared to current AMD and Nvidia prices. But can we be really sure of that? Intel was never afraid to use over." Yeah, so let's do this here. This is a perfect time for me to spring into the pricing discussion, not just for Z, but let's also talk about Alder Lake here a bit, shall we? So let me write this down. Um, Alder Lake pricing. Alder Lake and XE pricing. That is in the title of this loose ends, right? Um, let's see here. Let me make sure I didn't miss anything. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. No tipped questions yet. So let me talk about this here. I keep seeing people doubt that Alder Lake SKUs will be priced in line with the previous gen, or that Intel Arc GPUs will be priced aggressively because AMD, because Intel greedy. Um, Guys, Intel operates in their own little world, and if you talk to their marketing department, that becomes very obvious. Um, like look at how Intel just kind of ignores AMD most of the time when they talk about it. They kind of have to acknowledge them now, but they try to ignore them. So look at what Intel did from KB Lake to Rocket Lake. They went 4 cores, then 6 cores, then 6 cores, 12 threads. They were always going to do that no matter what the performance from AMD was for the most part. Intel never wants to increase performance too quickly that they make their old product look too super stupid. And they were forced to bring out more threads per segment faster than they wanted to. Intel wanted to keep you on, quad core i5s probably till 2019 or later if they could have, but they were forced to bring out 6 cores sooner. They're forced to bring out the 9900K. They accelerated the release of the 8700K, and they price it in line with the previous gen. So it's not that Intel is being more greedy, it's that they believe they have the mind share to ignore their competition. And that's what they've been doing. So I think there's no reason to think that the i5 12600K, even though it should at least match and overall beat the 5800X, like there's no reason Intel will charge more than 350 for that. And I think there's plenty of evidence it'll be 300 or less. Same goes for the i7 below 500 and the i9. Well, the i9, they charge a lot for those sometimes. So it's hard to say exactly where the i9 will be priced, but There's a real misconception here about how Intel prices its parts. It's not just because they're more greedy, it's because they kind of intentionally ignore the competition and refuse to innovate too quickly to make their old products look bad, right? So that's for their CPUs. And keep in mind that they kind of have to be a little more aggressive, relatively speaking, than they have been, because DDR5, the motherboards will be more, expensive. And then when it comes to XE, again, I don't know why it's doubted. Intel needs XE to be competitive, and they have the volume and the supply ready to have a big launch. They're going to price Arc, Alchemist, whatever you want to call it. Take your pick. They have 10 names for this graphics card, apparently. They're going to price it in line with the market because they need it to be a successful first launch. And Intel is not treating this like Larrabee, right? I know some people are still worried that they'll like not do as well as they want and cancel it, but I just don't see that. I think they're going to be as aggressive as they need to be, and I think people are underestimating like that the 6600 XT has decent profit margins, right? My understanding is that it has at least like a 30 to 40% profit even at MSRP, even with these increased prices. It's probably higher than that. So there's no reason Intel can't keep 10-20% profit margins at $400 with a 16 gigabyte card, or maybe not 16 gigabytes anymore because of GDR6 prices, but at 450. They just can. It's not even just a matter of them selling the card at cost. They can make a profit and sell it for like 400, 450. They can. They can do that. They have the ability to. AMD and Nvidia are making massive margins. So all of these questions about can we be sure? You can't be 100% sure of anything because, they'll decide to price it where they want to. But what we can say is there's no evidence they won't price XE in line with the market for at least most of it. And there's no evidence that they are going to radically increase prices of i5s. There's just no evidence of it. So, yeah. Felix Fortuna writes in, he says, do you have any info regarding RDNA 3 APUs? Yeah. Oh, wait, no, I think Rembrandt is confirmed. I haven't paid much of attention to Rembrandt for a while. Isn't that confirmed to be RDNA 2 or was that RDNA 3? I think that's been confirmed to be RDNA 2, right? By Executable Fix, which I trust that guy pretty much. Yeah, so let me look here. Yeah, so, yeah. So, RDNA 3 APUs, I wouldn't expect them till the end of next year at the soonest. In terms of what you would expect, well, Rembrandt's going up to 12 compute units. So, I mean, if that's going up to 12 compute units on 6 nanometer, then on 5 nanometer, I see no reason why they can't go to like 20 compute units or 24 with RDNA 3. And so that would put you in the ballpark of like, well, with DDR5, you know, you could actually see that being about as strong as an RX 590, couldn't you? In an APU, somewhere around there. So is it possible for 1080p 60 probably at the end of next year with APUs? Yeah, I think so. And Intel is going to be bringing out some pretty powerful APUs as well, guys. So look out for that. I like get ready for Raptor Lake APUs. They're probably going to be pretty impressive. Yeah, I think 1080p 60 will be doable on APUs late next year. Even if the 590 is going to be crazy old by then, I think you're going to get close to that. And yeah, I think so. I think 1080p 60, at least medium settings, is just going to be standard as the bottom there. So let me put in like a timestamp for RDNA 3 and Raptor Lake, not Rocket Lake, APUs. All right, I believe I have some more Patreon. Oh, we got a tipped question from Deco. Will AMD and Intel set the limit for GPUs to 16 gigabytes for the higher tier? Do you think Nvidia will aim for 16 gigabytes on their higher SKUs? I can't confirm. I know some people are leaking stuff about Lovelace here and there. I can't confirm what the bus will be, but let's say Lovelace is 384-bit, which I don't think they're going to get to 512-bit, or if they do, that's going to be a really tight fit and heat dense. I mean, my God, we'll see. But I think Nvidia is going to increase RAM with the next generation. I think Lovelace is where Nvidia tries to cement higher prices, and they're going to do so by which, let me put a timestamp on this as well because I want to make something clear. I almost said a different word. I want to make something clear, not the other one, not something that rhymes with clear. I want to make something clear here. Um, Let me see. Lovelace VRAM and pricing. So Deco, here's what I would say. Right now, AMD and Nvidia have seen firsthand that people are willing to spend more money. And I think you saw a similar situation back with Pascal. Now, look it up, guys. You got to bear with me here. A lot of people blame Turing for raising prices. I blame Pascal. Pascal raised prices. The GTX 1080 launched for 700. That was a 104 die. Some people will say, no, it was 600. I bought it for 500. Well, the Founders Edition was 700. Most AIB models were over 700. And most of the first holiday season for the 1080 was, well, how much was it? 700 or more. Now, by the time Vega was out, NVIDIA had done a price drop to combat it. But when Pascal launched, it was 700 for a 1080. And how did they get away with that? Well, it radically increased performance more than Ampere, by the way. Ampere is not the biggest performance increase, in the past whatever years. Pascal increased performance over Fury and Maxwell by like 60% or more. And it overclocked well. Unlike Ampere, which increased performance more like 55%. And if you overclocked, it could get, so Pascal was a bigger deal. They had a huge performance increase while increasing efficiency, and Nvidia increased VRAM by a massive amount. They had the 8 GB 1080 instead of the 4 GB 980. How did they justify making the 80 series, which was still a 104 die, just like the 980 was a 104 die? How did they justify raising prices by 40% over what the 980 was? Well, simple. It was 60% stronger. Well, compared to the 980, no, it was more than that. It was like double the performance or something than a 980, and it doubled the VRAM. I think that's what Nvidia is going to do with Lovelace. I think they're going to push it super hard. I think they're going to give you like 24 gigabytes or at least 16 on the 4080. And I think they're going to increase performance by at least 60% with Lovelace over Ampere. Possibly 80%. I've heard they might double it, but that's only going to happen if they push power limits to absurd amounts, which maybe they will. you know, yeah, also the 1060 was $300, Founders Edition first. You can say the 1060 was whatever they said it was, $250, but in effect, the first month the 1060 was on sale or something, or the first week or two, it was only on sale for $300 with a Founders cooler. The 1060 was $300. Usually 60 series cards were $200. So Pascal really raised prices, and they got away with it by doubling VRAM or more. You had a 12 gigabyte, $1,200 card. You had, I guess Maxwell tightened at 12 gigabytes as well, didn't it, though? You had a 11 gigabyte 80 Ti instead of a 6 gigabyte 980 Ti. You had an 8 gigabyte 1070 over a 3.5 gigabyte 970. But hey, the 1070 was a cut down 104 die, just like the 970 was a cut down 104 die. And they increased prices by like 30-40% over the 970, guys. That's what I think you can expect with Lovelace. They're going to massively increase performance, massively increase VRAM, and the 4080, whatever they decide to make it, whether it's the 102 die or just the top 104 die, they're going to say, hey, the top 104 die, for example, if that's what they do again, is 300 watts or 250 watts. It has 16 gigabytes instead of 10 gigabytes with the 3080, and it's 50% stronger, and we're going to charge 800 or 900 for it. And people are going to go, wait a second, though, this is like 30% stronger than a 3090, and it has 16 gigabytes for 900. They'll justify it and buy it, and then you'll have the 4090, or if they make a new Titan for whatever, for like $1,700, and they'll say twice as strong as the 3090 or 80% stronger. Who's going to complain if it has 24 or 32 gigabytes or 48 gigabytes? Probably not 48. But yeah, I think that's what's going to happen, and I think that's what they're going to do with VRAM. So to answer your question, Deco, that I've been talking about for a while here, I think they're going to massively increase VRAM. and they're going to increase performance and they're going to increase price, and it's going to look really good compared to Ampere because of how much stronger and how much more VRAM it has. It's the same thing they did with Pascal, you know. So let me see what we got here. All righty. So no more tip questions there. So let me go to the Patreon questions. Let me write down a timestamp for his question. Took me a while to get here, but you guys are very inquisitive today, which is nice. Carbon Cry writes in and he says, what are your takeaways from this year's Hot Chips? What impressed you the most? What impressed you the least? Do you feel the frequency of people saying Moore's Law isn't dead is decreasing this year? Actually, I do. I think you're seeing less people harp about Moore's Law because at the end of the day, who cares about Moore's Law? Let's just increase performance, right? RDNA 2, I mean, it radically increased performance per watt on the same node. I mean, look at the 6600 XT. As much as the pricing sucks, technologically it's impressive. The 6600 XT is a smaller die size than the 5700 XT, while giving you a little more performance and like 30% less energy on the same node. You know, you don't need to talk about Moore's Law. I don't care how you increase performance. I don't care if it's through 3D stacking, giant wafer scale dies, V-cache, or just a better architecture. And I think people are talking about Moore's Law a lot less at this hot chip. So that's definitely something I did notice, Carbon Cry. In terms of what impressed me the most, honestly, I think both the RDNA 2 with Andrew, it starts with a P. I actually talked to him on Slack after that. Nice guy. He apparently listens to Broken Silicon, by the way. The guy who gave the RDNA 2 presentation at Hot Chips actually liked the Brian Heemsker episode. So, you know, a VP at Radeon can recommend the Brian Heemskirk episode of Broken Silicon. That was the indie dev. Look out for that episode if you want to know what the AMD people apparently listens to. And then what else was there? And then I think the Alder Lake scheduling breakdown was really interesting. There was a lot of interesting things out there. But I'd say the most interesting thing was kind of RDNA 2 openly being talked about as trying to double performance from the start, and how early on they said we're not making a 512 or 384 bit, that we can use cache, and the decision making and demonstrating how RDNA 2 allows them to use half the performance at the same frequency of RDNA 1, which is a far greater efficiency increase than Ampere brought over Turing. You know, I think Nvidia's, I've been told that Nvidia's 1.9x efficiency increase over Turing, which is absolute bullshit, was they took like a 3090 and downclocked it to the lower speed. I think they underclocked both a 3090 and a 2080 Ti, including the GDR6X memory, and that's how they almost doubled performance with Turing to Ampere. And AMD didn't need to downclock the prior gen. AMD says at same clock speeds as previous gen, we can run at less than half the power. That's just proof in the pudding right there from both of their presentations. Which one achieved a greater efficiency increase? And remember that RDNA 1 was as efficient as Turing. It couldn't do ray tracing, I guess, but it was close. And this is where people say, well, Turing was on 12 nanometer. Yeah, Turing also had, you know, double the die size. So there's multiple ways to skin a cat. I think the RDNA 2 presentation was really impressive. The Synopsys presentation was pretty okay. There's some interesting Q&A portions there. And the Alder Lake presentation I thought was really good. Deco writes in and he says, it's interesting you bring up gen over gen. I tend to think it's true. With Lovelace specifically, I think most people have become numb almost to the price situation with GPUs and they won't care. Well, at the end of the day, people will buy what they buy. And if Lovelace, you know, let's be fair. If the 4080 is like, I don't know, I'm just spitballing here, you know, beats the 3090 for $900 while using less energy. At the end of the day, if you didn't need a 3090 and you waited to buy Lovelace, you got something that was more efficient, stronger, and cheaper than if you bought a 3090. So I guess it's a better increase, though. It is moving the ball forward. You know, I don't know. So at the end of the day, as much as people like want to be mad at consumers, it's like things are getting better faster than they were before. And I think, and I talk about this in the PC perspective, Broken Silicon, highly recommend it. I think we really do come to the conclusion that if you think about it, Moore's law really died around 28 nanometer, just completely. It's just done. It was slow. It was basically dead 10 years before that, but like that's where it was like just completely not up for debate. We were stuck on 28 nanometer for years. But so then what happens? Well, everything got cheap and at least you could build budget builds. At the same time, though, I think what we're learning is that people would rather you increase prices and double performance than cut prices in half and only increase performance by 30%. People want a 60% performance increase, even if you increase prices by 30%. They would rather have that than lowering prices and increasing performance a little, which I get it. At the end of the day, right, if you have a 290X and you're looking at Maxwell, you're like, so 980 is not that much stronger than a 290X, has the same amount of RAM. This is, why do I care? This is there's 2 years later and it's more efficient, but it's not letting me do anything new, right? I can see why consumers would come to that conclusion. Let me see then. Okay, so there's Carbon Cry's question. Let me keep scrolling down. Pear writes him, as a college student who just got released from COVID jail, I've got to ask, what was your favorite alcoholic beverage when you were in college? Any recommendations for someone on a budget? To be honest, I really didn't drink in college at all. I was honestly pretty studious and introverted all the way through college. I'm being honest. I I was not out there. I was pretty much by myself studying or playing Dark Souls or Battlefield 4. That's what I was doing in college. Mechanical engineering was hard though, so I always wonder if I would have partied, if I would have even gotten the grades I got. You know, Let me get rid of this here. Let me just report that person as well. A lot of spam, guys. A lot of spam. But yeah, so in terms of what I drank in college, frankly, Blue Moon and Bailey's. I drank Bailey's a bit near the end of college. I liked White Russians a lot, still do. But what I like now is Final Absolution, which is brewed in Warren, Michigan, in the Detroit area. It's my favorite beer, and I like all types of beers. I usually get the craft ales, blondes, Belgians, and triple ales in the local region because they're almost always good. And there's always something new to try. Um, but yeah, Final Absolution is my favorite one. I've really been getting into Japanese gin lately. Japanese gin. I think it's called Hayoko 135 Degree North Street. Good gin for a gin and tonic if you want one. Matthew Salzberg writes in and he says, I'm wondering if Dan thinks his GPU will last him 3 to 4 years before needing an upgrade. So for those who don't know, Dan got a 60. I was able to secure Dan a 6700 XT for, frankly, still about 20% more than MSRP, but I got him it, and that's better than he could have had. So Dan has an Asus dual fan 6700 XT. He says it's quiet, it's nice. He sold his Vega 56 for more than he paid for that. But I would say that, yeah, he's not worried about it lasting a long time. Technically, the 6700 XT is capable of ray tracing, and in recent games optimized for AMD, it works fine. The 6700 XT, I would say, edges out the console slightly, especially if you overclock it. Depending on the game, obviously, there's going to be some exclusive games on the consoles that really push them. But yeah, I don't think Dan's worried about having a 6700 XT for years. I think he'll upgrade when he can sell it for something that's double the performance. But until then, honestly, and I keep saying this, I really feel like the 3070 Ti, 3070 6700 XT, right about there, 3070 level is right at about the level where you're really set, because that's about a 2080 Ti. And it's just easy to run 4K, guys, at that level. And if you have to turn down settings, or if you want to for a higher or more stable frame rate, like I run Deep Rock Galactic at resolution scale at like 70%, because I think resolution scale TAA works really well in that game. And I just want to locked 120 hertz at 4K. So I'll lower the resolution scale a bit, just have that locked frame rate, And if you're on 4K 60, Dan just turns everything up to max pretty much with a 6700 XT. And there's usually like one setting he needs to turn down, and it looks great on his 4K monitor. So yeah, I think Dan's not worried about getting a new GPU, but if it makes sense, he will. And if Intel Xe works out really well, if Xe is a 16 gigabyte 3070 Ti that uses less energy with better, let's say, ray tracing and rendering performance, I'm getting it, man. That's what I want. I think 3070 performance is about where I'm happy. After that, I'd like better app performance and more VRAM. Will Dan ever go to high refresh rates? um, he's looking for it. He's just not quite sure when to buy. But and he's trying to time his purchase accordingly. But yeah, he's looking at 4K 120 monitors right now because they're starting to get to about $600. You know, so Dan's upgrades. We'll call that a timestamp. Say that was around 142. When going on all right, so that's all of the Patreon questions from the preset questions. That's all the tip questions right now, so that's good. Let me make sure, did I get through all of the main themes? I talked about Alder Lake pricing, Z performance. I guess let me say that too. Let me continue that conversation about Z just because I brought it up and I said I was going to talk about it. So here's what I'm going to say about Xe, and I've already said it in the recent Broken Silicon, but I think in my next ARC video, Z video, ZX, HPG, Alchemist video, whatever you want to call it, Intel. I think my next video is going to be kind of setting expectations. And I've said this, it's at least as strong as a 3060. My leaks said 3070 at least. And if you look at the performance, and Dan points this out very, very well in the recent Broken Silicon. So listen to that. Listen to that section if you want to know. Like, it's the evidence is there that Intel Xe DG2 should be able to perform as well as a 3070 on paper. Look at the teraflops, right? From what I saw, it was kind of close to like a 3060 Ti or higher in teraflops, above a 6700 XT in teraflops. It's on 6 nanometer with a die size around the same as a 3070 Ti. So think about it. So what we know is Intel is using a die the size of a 3070 Ti. What we know is that 6 nanometer is a way better node than Samsung 8 nanometer. And in fact, it's more dense. So they can pack more transistors into a 6 nanometer than the 7 nanometer one. So in effect, it's really like a 30-40% bigger die than the 6700 XT on paper, right? Because it's 6 nanometer versus 7. Or at least it can be if they decided to make it denser, which I assume they would, at least to a certain degree. So there's no reason Z shouldn't be up there then, right? Like there's no reason. If it's going to use more than 200 watts, then it would be actually way worse technologically, even if it was just a 3070, right? Because it's using a better, bigger die than the 3070. So you should expect 3070 performance, and anything less than that is meh. And I know that it's above a 3060. What I will say is that if it's just a 3060, I mean, it better use 100 watts because that's pretty bad considering the die size. Because that's what you're basically saying is they're going to have a die that's effectively double the size because it's 6 nanometer versus 7. Effectively double the size of a 6600 XT, and yet it's the same performance. That's pretty bad if it can't beat it in efficiency. So that's all I'm saying is I expect Z to be close to a 3070. I always have. So far, everything in the Z leaks turned out true. And I know that even with horrible drivers, it's at a 3060 or higher. So that's all we can say. Anyone doubting that they'll bring out a mid-range or something around their card can throw that away at this point. It's going to. So that's what I will say about Xe performance. Had to get that out there because I said I would in the title, right? So all right, we're getting there. We are getting near the end. I always stop right at when we hit or before 2 hours. So remember to get in your tip questions now if you want to. It's pretty much getting close to final call. My voice is wearing out. And remember to hit the like button and subscribe. Check that you're subscribed. I guarantee there's a decent amount of people watching that aren't, So let's see. Deco writes in and he says, do you think over the next few years with Zen 3D 4 or 5, and Alder or through Arrow Lake, do you think Zen 3 will age worse as time goes on? Uh, hmm. I'll put this down as a timestamp. Will Zen 3 age well? I mean, define aging well, right? I It's stronger than what's in the consoles. If you have a 5900X, I think there's no chance it's not running games at 60 frames in the overwhelming majority of games for like 5 years. So, I don't know. Will it age worse than what? Is it going to age worse than Zen 1? Because Zen 1's aged pretty damn well. No, it didn't like gain gaming performance. But at the end of the day, Zen 1, you have 8 cores, it's doing 60 frames the whole time, for 5 years straight it will. So, I think Zen 3 is gonna age fine. Will it age better than Zen 3D? Eh, it depends how you count it. About the same. And I think once you get to like Zen 3D and Alder Lake, you're talking about something that's just going to last a long time. And me and Dan talk about this on the new Broken Silicon. It's like, I don't know that I'm going to get Raptor Lake. I mean, why get why get Alder Lake when I can wait for Raptor Lake? Why get Raptor Lake when I can wait for Meteor Lake? Why get Meteor Lake when I can wait for Lunar Lake? Why get Lunar Lake when I can wait for Nova Lake? And so on and so forth. Why? There's no need for me to unless my performance is down. And I just find it hard to believe my 3950X won't be running games well for a long time. So, and anytime I miss Raptor Lake, it's like, oh well, guess I'm getting Meteor Lake or Arrow Lake or something. So I would just say, I think whatever performance it's at is probably going to be fine. I think 6 cores eventually could be skimping it a little bit, but also if you bought a 5600X, how much did you pay? $300, maybe less. It's on sale right now, I think, on Amazon and Newegg. So if you paid $300, you paid less than half the price of a console for a 6 core, and it lasts you like 4 years at 120 frames, and then you need to get an upgrade. Can you really complain? You kind of got a mid-range gaming CPU and it lasted you well. So I don't worry about it. I think things are pretty good right now. I would worry about anything from Intel before Comet Lake aging badly due to increasing security problems on 14 nanometer, which people forget they're still there. And PCIe 5.0 coming around. If you have a Zen 2 or later AMD chip, you got everything pretty much. So I just wouldn't worry about it. Felix Fortuna writes in, he says, what did you usually eat back in college? Oh, what was in the cafeteria, man? I mean, a lot of sandwiches. I really like the French toast sticks with bacon in the morning and some hash browns when they served that at Michigan Tech. That's where I went to college. I mean, I will say by the time I was a senior, I was so busy with my final classes that I got tired of food and I would just like go to the cafeteria and have like 6 hamburger patties and a bowl of applesauce. And that's just what I ate. Like I just eat like a bowl of applesauce and and a pound of meat and be like, there's my fuel back to the lab to work on this project. It was literally just about calorie intake at a certain point because I got bored with eating there after 4 years. But I mean, that's what I ate. Judson N writes, and Royal Core is supposed to improve x86 efficiency, allegedly. Does that mean it's still legacy x86? We'll have to see, Judson. I kind of made that pretty clear. They were looking at dropping some forms of support, weren't I? And I can't say they're going to. I know that this is a hard decision. What legacy instructions, what legacy x86 should we support? If it, because like if we double IPC, maybe worth dropping something, one of those older binaries. But if you don't double IPC, if it's just a 20% increase, an extra 20%, they might want to keep backwards compatibility if AMD is going to. So, or you have to think like, will they set up a system where they just have like biggest, big, and little cores, right? Because I think right now on ARM, you have big, medium, little core, big, medium, little. Like, would it surprise you if they just had all legacy support on like 8 little cores? And they're like, if you need to use an old application, these, I don't know, what's the rumor name, Darkmont cores. And these like 32 Darkmont cores will sure as hell work well with your old games. We'll just have to run legacy apps only off the little cores, but they're as good as Golden Cove and IPC, and it's 32 of them. So you're not going to complain. That's kind of what I see happening if they were to go down the track of like dropping support of old instruction sets. But, by then they'll have to master scheduling versus different instruction sets. Right now, with Lakefield, Intel disabled some instructions so both cores could not have to worry about that. And I think Golden Cove is keeping the same instruction sets between Gracemont and Golden Cove. So that's definitely a problem they're going to have to tackle before that happens. And they might not want to even bother doing that. So we'll have to see. Royal Core. 5 minutes left. 5 minutes left, everybody. Voice is wearing out. Last call for questions. Let me see if I can get a couple of the Discord, which again, support us on Patreon, guys. You're going to get early ad-free access to broken silicons, die shrinks. I actually do have a flyover states coming first to patrons. There's all of these exclusive podcasts. You can ask questions for free. Don't forget that. Let me see here. Summed Robin writes in and asks, do you think Nvidia will develop RISC-V CPUs if the ARM deal falls through? It's hard to say. I think the work they're doing right now, they'd probably just try to commit to using ARM still, maybe. It's hard to say. They might switch to RISC-V, but I'm not sure. Leet Bongmaster writes in and says, love the channel and podcast. Keep it real, Tom. I always try to. Let's see what else we got here. AC666 writes in, will future Xe-HPG products really have HBM? According to older roadmaps, I have yes, but I go watch the next 2 years of graphics video, guys. I outlined what Intel's ambitions were with DG1, DG2, DG3 a year ago, and I said openly in that leak, I don't think half of this is going to come true. But yeah, they showed HBM and large buffers of HBM on their roadmaps. And come on, guys, they hired Raja Kaduri. Do you think they're going to use HBM? I think so. On which products? I'm not sure yet. They'd probably save it for the high end. And they're just not ready to compete in the high end yet, I would say. Let's see here. Considering Intel's... Let's see. I saw a couple of interesting questions here. Melodic Warrior writes in and says, I have a lot of friends who are excited for Intel Arc, but when he watched your portion on the drivers, he cringed. He said it needs to be good. Yeah, look, when I talk about drivers, Melodic Warrior, I'm specifically talking about they're just not done. Like they haven't written the DirectX 12 portion yet. It's not so much that they won't have the stuff. The big worry I would have with Xe drivers is just, is it battle tested by the time it's out? And I'm not even really worried about ray tracing or Xe super sampling. I think their super sampling could be awesome. It could beat DLSS overnight. I think it could. They have the resources to do something like that. But I have to say that I would worry about how their menu's organized because they just haven't done, their own menus. So why would we be sure that their menus will be as well organized as AMD and Nvidia? Let's see. Someone said I missed a question, but I don't see it. Remember, if I missed a question, just put it into the reader mail channels on the Moore's Laws Did Discord. But let me see here. Any other questions? We got Root Knight says, question for Tom, with 500 watt GPUs on the horizon, would you bet gamers will call it quits on the More power train? Well, you have to think of it this way, though. I mean, Nvidia kind of got everyone to buy 1000 watt power supply, so they can probably handle a 500 watt GPU, can't they? I doubt a lot of people. I'm not going to get one because it honestly would overpower mine. But you've got to think about that, right? Like, I think most gamers aren't going to bother with it. But here's the thing. The people that would buy a 500 watt GPU are not the same people trying to save money, right? So the people who buy a 500-watt GPU probably are fine buying a $2,000 power supply anyway. Well, actually, power supplies have gotten pretty cheap. Are probably fine buying an expensive power supply anyways. And the people that don't want to use more energy probably are buying mid-range cards. So I think it's not gonna. I think it'd be insane if they go much high above 500 watts in the enthusiast market. But I don't think the enthusiast market's going to care if it's at 500 watts because they're willing to spend for it. What will happen is a lot of people might find that they can't cool a room effectively at 500 watts. I'm sorry, guys. 500 watts is like triple Crossfire back in the day. It's going to just get so hot, even if you have good air conditioning. Even in the winter, you might make your house too warm. So I think there's going to be a rude awakening if they actually do that. I've heard a lot of people with 3090 say, I'm going to avoid doing this again. So all right. Mike Bruzoni says, nope, it's coming. The refresh of Super with a wider bus and more VRAM is coming. Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me if they just die shrink Ampere before Lovelace is out too. All right, guys, that is going to be it. Remember to subscribe to Moore's Law is Dead. Check that you're subscribed. Check to ring the bell button to not miss upcoming videos. And remember that ARC video is coming, everybody. Support us on Patreon if you can. All right, thanks for watching.